Welcome to the Mutual Aid Report. The Mutual Aid Report delves into the concept of mutual aid and unpacks its historical significance and its role in local communities by spotlighting individuals who are making a real difference at the grassroots level in the city of Chicago. Let's elevate the profile of mutual aid, shed light on these community-based initiatives, and motivate others to either join or back existing ventures. Let's get right into it.
Welcome to the Mutual Aid Report. My name is Mario Smith. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate your patronage. We're here the second and fourth Tuesday of each month, and we really intend on changing the narrative about food insecurity in Chicago. And not just food insecurity, but the idea of people needing help and being able to get the help that they need. And to that end, today, we are very honored and super happy to have the Greater Chicago Food Depository on the program today. And representing the Greater Chicago Food Depository are Ruby Ferguson from the GCFD, as we will refer to it from time to time, and from IMAN. Shout out to my people at IMAN. We have Sana Syed on the program today as well. Thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Mario.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Absolutely. Ruby, I'm going to start with you. I'd like to ask about the beginnings of the Greater Food Depository, or the Greater Chicago Food Depository, and how things have been going. I know it's been a busy time with the holiday and all of that, and just in general, since COVID has happened, it's been a little bit busier than normal for you guys. But how did all this begin with the GCFD?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. And the Greater Chicago Food Depository is Chicago's food bank. So I think it's helpful to step back and provide a little bit of clarity of what a food bank is. But we are basically the supplier of food and distribute food to food pantries across our network in Cook County. So we resource food, we distribute it across the city and across the county, but then we also do a whole bunch of other work to really address inequities in our food system around the root causes that cause hunger. So that includes workforce development, that includes thinking about prepared meals, that includes benefits enrollment and making sure that folks have the finances to pay for food and to pay for light bills, or making sure they're on Medicaid. And so really thinking about how all of those branches of our organization work together to get towards our mission to ending hunger. And so it's a little bit about our work. And you asked kind of how it's been a busy time and how things have been post-COVID. And I'm super excited to have Sana and IMAN kind of representing IMAN on the call with us today, because I think COVID was an opportunity for a lot of organizations to step back. I was not at the organization in 2020, but have been able to kind of join and see the changes that were made from there. And a lot of that is reflecting on doing the same thing that we always have done is not going to get us to the solutions that we're looking for. So hunger, like many inequities that exist in the United States and across the world, has a lot of root causes deeply embedded in poverty and racism. And if we want to undo that, if we want to end that, we have to think differently and work alongside partners like IMAN to get towards that goal. So IMAN is a great example, and I'll kick it to Sana to talk a little bit about our work, but IMAN is a great example of a partner embedded in community, committed to community, and that can help us and show us and work in partnership with us on how we can transform and create equitable food access there.
Thank you, Ruby. And thank you, Mario, again, for having us. It's so exciting to be a part of this conversation. So at the IMAN, which is the Inner City Muslim Action Network, is a community organization that was incorporated formally in 1997 through the drive of people who were directly affected by or deeply invested in issues that were afflicting communities like the South Side of Chicago. And our mission has been to foster health, wellness, and healing in the inner cities, both on Chicago's South Side and on Atlanta's West End. And we do that through organizing for change, cultivating the arts. We're operating a holistic, federally qualified health center that, and also through really addressing through a number of holistic interventions the structural and systemic injustices that affect the quality of life for members in our community. So we do that, like I said earlier, we have a federally qualified health center. We provide primary behavioral oral health care, but we also have a very robust arts and culture department that helps us to radically reimagine the world as it could be, and also serve as a tool, a means for healing and reconciliation and placemaking, and then also the criminal justice reform work that we do through organizing, as well as the food food ecosystems work that we've been doing over the last many, many years, is essentially where, how our partnership with Greater Chicago Food Depository really sort of deepened. And honestly, we've also really, had over the past many years had a hard time with trying to being as intersectional as we were. Sometimes has been both a challenge and a gift. And now there is a greater appreciation for why we can't just be one thing. But for us, it was always very clear that we can't address any one issue in a silo without also addressing the many other issues that are connected to that issue. So for us, re-entry work was also really, really important, and providing transitional housing, leadership development, wraparound services for returning citizens and justice-involved young men and women was also really critical. So our model essentially comprises of healthcare, the federally qualified health center, the arts and culture work that we do, both through an in-person ceramic studio, which is really rooted in the community and one of the only ceramic studios on the south side of Chicago, but also through a nationwide impressive roster of artists who are working on these issues with us in a variety of ways and are very embedded in everything we do, also through our organizing and advocacy work, and then through green reentry. My specific work over the last, particularly since COVID, but also just before that, over the last many years, has been focused around bringing or leading an effort called Go Green on Racine, which is a neighborhood revitalization effort in the heart of Inglewood. And that constitutes really with the mission to sort of help bridge the life expectancy gap. We have a 31.2-year life expectancy gap between Inglewood on the south side and Streeterville, which is 9 miles north. And through Go Green on Racine and through the introduction of some catalytic developments at Go Green on Racine, beginning with the fresh market, a Go Green community fresh market, but then also through the repurposing of the closed Chicago Public School into a hub for housing, healthcare, and jobs for returning citizens, through a broader housing vision and also a transit advocacy campaign. We're hoping to really move the needle on the health and wealth gap in Inglewood.
To that end, the city of Chicago is currently the hub in the Midwest for folks coming from Texas by way of Venezuela and other parts of Central America, Latin America, and what is being called, I don't really like using the term the migrant issue. It is a displacement issue, if it's anything. But to that end, we are approaching winter in Chicago. As we found out recently, it got very cold very fast. And when you're talking about houseless people, hundreds of thousands of them, houseless people throughout the city, but definitely with this particular situation, how is the Greater Food Depository, the Greater Chicago Food Depository, working to assist organizations like IMAN and the other pantries that you guys work with to make sure that folks get fed and other things that they need?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, we made sure that all of our partners that are within our network, that we're seeing higher volumes of folks needing food than they were before because of an influx of our new Chicagoans, that they had the resources that they need, and if they needed to increase the amount of food that they were ordering, that was there. But I think another big way that we've been showing up is that we actually have been providing meals directly to shelters at some of the locations throughout the city. And I think what's really important to elevate there is that the strategies that we implement to address immediate need also need to get to the root cause work. And so the way that we did that was by selecting BIPOC-led and women-led restaurants and food service organizations to be the ones to provide the meals in addition to the meals that we could provide. So that way we could pay a higher cost point to those BIPOC-led restaurants and create a huge impact. And so we had some restaurateurs explain to us that influx of funding that they received and supporting that shelter helped them get ahead a few months in a way that they hadn't been able to, or help them recover post-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really great example of thinking about how are we addressing that immediate need while also getting to that root cause solution. And I think the story of the food depository and IMAN is a great example of, we started with something with immediate need. IMAN had a much bigger vision when they first came to the food depository. And we thought about our usual ways of working, right? And how can we help you set up a pantry, and what does that look like? But over time, and understanding that there needs to be this deeper commitment to root cause work, we worked with IMAN and are exploring some ways to invest in the root cause work that they're doing and work alongside in partnership with IMAN to really not only say, okay, here's how we get you food today, but how do we make it sure that your next generation has food on the table consistently, and that we're not just talking about food security, but we're talking about the vibrancy of food and the vibrancy of life that can happen when we think about those services there. I think Sana can speak. Go ahead.
I was just gonna I was just gonna say, it's kind of the idea of giving someone the blueprint on how to grow food, for example, so that they can always have a way to be fed. You teach a man to fish, et cetera, et cetera. And Sana, I'm sorry, I did not mean to cut you off. Go right ahead.
Sure. So essentially, I mean, I think, Greater Chicago Food Depository and IMAN have had a long-standing relationship. So way back in the early 2000s, we had a food pantry up on 53rd and Justine, and Greater Chicago Food Depository was our partner in that effort. Many, many years ago, I guess around the time when, with all the food ecosystems work that we had been doing, which included a corner store campaign, to help radically reimagine what corner stores in neighborhoods like on the south and west sides of Chicago could look like, that were essentially many times immigrant run or operated or owned stores that were showing up in neighborhoods, sometimes in good ways, but in many ways also kind of perpetuating the same issues that we see more broadly in society, and creating this sort of a tension between residents and these stores for how these stores were showing up. So we found ourselves in a unique position to agitate these stores, and not only agitate them and call them out, but then also incentivize and support them to show up differently in neighborhoods. So we had all of this history of working with the corner store campaign. We used to have the farmers markets, the Fresh Beats and Eats farmers market. We had the backyard gardens. So in 2020, as construction on the fresh market was underway, we had again a sort of a revival of this conversation with the Greater Chicago Food Depository, and it was time for us to partner again in a bigger way than we had back in the early 2000s. And at that time, the idea was, because we, even leading up to fundraising for the fresh market, it was a very challenging sort of task to get people to see why a community like ours actually needed a grocery store and not a food pantry.
Mm-hmm.
We had to push funders. A lot of times funders were like, well, are you sure you want to run a grocery store? It's already a really low margin industry. You really think that the community wants the grocery store? Why don't you just open a pantry? And for us, it was absolutely not. We can do the pantry, but we absolutely need the commerce. We absolutely need the business. We absolutely need to build that kind of retail infrastructure in our community. And that is what we wanted to do. And when we were talking with GCFD at the time, and that we had you're walking through the market as it was under construction, and they really loved the fact that we were doing the market, but they were bound by certain at the time, certain parameters, I guess some limitations that made it difficult for them to see how they could do any food distribution kind of work out of a grocery store. Now, the question might be, why do you need to do food distribution work out of a grocery store? And I'll tell you why. Because one, this grocery store is actually in a neighborhood with an average median income of less than $23,000 a year, right? Purchasing power is an issue. The problem of food insecurity, like Ruby was saying earlier, and this is why workforce development is important, is actually also a problem of income. We do not actually have living wages for most people in our city, for a lot of people in our city. And therefore, it was even though we wanted to have a grocery store and we wanted it to be a retail experience, we also knew that we were going to need to create means of access for members in our community, so that the food that they purchase could be affordable for them. And our vision was to have what at the time we were thinking about as a food security fund. And at that time, it was not the right moment for us to be able to do that with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. So we went right ahead because it was in the heart of the pandemic and people still needed food. And we together opened a food and wellness center, which is a shopper style pantry right across from the market, from what was going to be the fresh market. And that food and wellness center did an incredible amount of work during the entire pandemic to really support people. But come around a few years later, we've continued these conversations with each other, and for us, it has been really inspiring to see both the humility and the agility of the food depository to say, hey, we weren't there then, but now we are. So let's actually do that food security fund. Mm-hmm. Let's actually partner in a different way. And for the first time, really, we have maybe, I don't know, Ruby, if there are other food banks in the country that are doing this, but this is for us not only a question that is localized and an opportunity that is localized, but it's also an opportunity for us to demonstrate how food banks can show up in hard-hit communities in a way that not only addresses the problem of food insecurity, but also invests in local businesses so that we begin to address the root causes. We begin to address the economic reasons behind which, that are behind the problem. And so now we're really excited. Actually, tomorrow are going to launch our pilot program of the Food Security Fund. We're going to call it Fresh Boost. And we have 30 participants who get supplemental income of $200 per individual at the market to use over every single month. And this is really the first time we're trying this, and it's not something that we've publicized yet, or but we already have 30 people that we could easily identify just from our from our daily experience at the market and at the health center to say, hey, we could, these families, these individuals could really use that extra support. And frankly, from having run a pantry, we know that people would much rather go to a grocery store and buy their own food. There's a dignity question there. There's a experience there. There's a quality. There's a question. There's a question of choice. Mm-hmm. All of which are sometimes more limited in the more conventional ways of doing things.
I want to just paint a picture for a moment too. We talk about communities. Chicago has 77 very strong, very proud communities. There's I won't say strong, but 77 very prideful communities. The folks who live on the south side of our city have as much pride as anybody that lives up north about their community, their neighborhood. And the idea that we have these food deserts and communities where there are no grocery stores, or the nearest one is miles away, and the economic disparity that is happening in our neighborhood, all the root causes of this bigger problem, you would think the idea of a grocery store being an anchor to economic stability would be a no-brainer for our governments, city and state, to say this is the least we can do to make sure that these communities that don't have grocery stores in them can have them, because even though the margin may not be great, it's economic stability for some folks who have zero, and it's fresher food than they'll get from constantly ordering fast food or eating fast food. I think, and I'm gathering particularly from what we're talking about today, I think there's an effort afoot in our city, at least, and in the state, I won't just limit it to Chicago, to change the narrative of these food deserts, of which there are still many communities in Chicago where you cannot get fresh groceries, fresh produce anywhere near where you live. It's a McDonald's within every 4 blocks of a human being on earth, but a grocery store in Inglewood is, not the easiest thing to find, but it's getting easier. And I applaud the efforts of the Greater Chicago Food Depository and their partners in making sure that this is something that's happening. To that end, the Illinois Farm to Food Bank program is an exciting adventure that is happening. can you tell the folks a little bit more about what that program is and how it is being implemented?
Yeah, and I might talk about a few federal programs that are coming down the pipeline. I think we talked about how the pandemic taught a lot of organizations, institutions, government entities that we can't keep doing things the way that we were doing and expecting a different change. And so there is the Farm to Food Bank program that's thinking about how do we get fresh produce from Illinois farmers to food banks and have those distributed to communities that are in need of access to fresh and local produce. There's also LFPA, which I'm going to butcher this acronym, but I'm going to try and remember it clearly because I've been talking about it so long, which is the Local Food Purchasing Agreement. And that's really focused on partnerships and kind of takes it even more hyper local. The results of that application hasn't come out, but it's thinking about how can a partner in community source food from local growers and then distribute that to communities and areas where there's high levels of food insecurity. I think those are great examples of what can happen with federal funding, but I think this is also an opportunity to highlight some of the ways that the Food Depository has thought about their sourcing and kind of alluding to that piece of how can we use our dollars to do what we're already doing, but invest in root cause work there. And so we have a hyper local sourcing program where we get to work with local growers here in the city, like Grow Greater Inglewood, Growing Home, and some other growers like that, where we actually source food from those growers and connect it directly to a pantry and create this hyper local network where we're thinking about those food access points that are in community with each other and making those connections there. So I think what you're highlighting, Mario, kind of double clicks on that example of how do we do what we've always done? There's immediate need. People need food, right? People are hungry. Inflation continues to rise. So we know that there's immediate need and we need to address that. But how can we do that in a way that is transformative and catalytic and really thinking about where inequities exist and invest in those places to address where there have been gaps in service and historic divestment and maybe more recent divestment as well.
First, shout out to my man Anton Seals and Tanya Ward and all the folks at GGE, my fam. Shout out to them. The first guest we had on our show, as a matter of fact, was Grow Greater. So shout out to them all the time for no reason at all outside of just they're amazing people sent from above. Thank you. And the other part, I also think it's important to, and this is the purpose of what we're trying to do. There are people who have immediate need that either people know how they can get help or they absolutely don't have a clue as to how they can be helped. And they end up suffering far longer than they need to. And I like the idea of being a teaching tool in that this is not going to end until everybody has a general sense of the root cause and how that can be dealt with and solved. So the work that you all are doing in our city is commendable and incredible. And I know that the Greater Chicago Food Depository gets a lot of play around the holidays because that's when people are generally like, generous and giving. And we got to make sure that folks eat for Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that sort of thing. But we're also talking about a city like Chicago, the third largest city in the United States, where that need is every day. And it can't just be twice 2 months out of 12 that we are focusing on food disparity in Chicago. And to that end, I would like to ask the net that the Greater Chicago Food Depository casts over the city in terms of being to help. How does that reach work, and who are the folks that are receiving the aid?
Yeah, I want to circle back first to one of the comments that you had about kind of partnership and getting to the root causes.
Sure.
And I think Sana alluded to this and some of the step back that the Food Depository did. There's a big piece there of also thinking about power sharing. So before I talk about our net, I want to really root, and we can't do this work alone.
Right.
This work is done in partnership with others. And so we have 800 plus partners that we do this work with. And so that's how we're able to have a net. And it's not just our net, it is the net of this network of partners, right? So I want to lift that and really talk about places where we had to acknowledge what does it mean to share power in this way? And power can mean lots of things. It can mean people, it can mean power, it can mean money, it can mean resources. And so, like I mentioned, we have those 800 partners that span across all of Cook County. And that looks like us offering services like benefits enrollment, soup kitchens, pantries, mobile markets, all of those pieces there. When we talk about food insecurity can impact anyone. It is not a fixed state. For some people, there are inequities where it stays a fixed state, but anyone can experience food insecurity in their life. And so it's important to acknowledge that, because the solutions that we have should not be stagnant or fixated on this one moment in time, but should be really creating community, so that way you have those resources there. And if you are in a moment where you're experiencing food insecurity, you can access that. But it cannot go unsaid, and Sana and I have both alluded to this, but when we talk about food insecurity, we have to acknowledge the racial inequities that show up in that food insecurity. And so when we look nationally, we know that Black and Hispanic households, especially if those households have children, are more impacted by food insecurity. And that becomes a little bit more exacerbated when we look here in Chicago. And for example, Black households with children at a rate of 33% are experiencing food insecurity. Hispanic households at a rate of 29% are experiencing food insecurity, whereas their white counterparts are only experiencing food insecurity at a rate of 17%. And so it's important to say food insecurity can impact anyone, but we know that because of the racist history in this country and a lot of the things that need to be undone and the inequities that need to be addressed, it's impacting people of color more. Sana, I don't know if you want to add any color, especially since you are close to a pantry that's implementing the program, and talk about some of the neighbors you support.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is this is a dance between managing the moment and building the future, right? There are realities on the ground that we need to manage and respond to in the immediate moment, while also building a future where the problem does not exist, right? That addresses that begins to bring solutions that kind of give us a different kind of problem. We're always going to have a problem, but at least change the kind of problem we have, right?
Right.
So that is something that I think, and also to your previous point around what efforts, so in part of doing things differently, one of the reasons why, to Ruby's point around racial equity, we don't just end up in neighborhoods that, they don't just end up with food insecure for no reason, right? Like, these are decisions made by business owners, by private and public people in power, authorities, really, and these are a whole number of decisions that lead to a situation where you don't actually have a grocery store, in a neighborhood. This is not a food desert, because it's like a naturally occurring thing. It's not a naturally occurring thing. Right. And as many food justice advocates have often said, that this is more an apartheid, like it's a food apartheid situation.
Absolutely.
And when we have communities and neighborhoods where big box grocery stores just don't want to operate. They don't want to operate. And therefore there need to be other solutions. And some of the more innovative, in addition to the programs that Ruby was mentioning, I think I personally took a lot of joy in the Illinois Grocery Initiative bill that was passed in earlier this year in April or May. And we worked with the governor's office on that bill. And while we haven't yet seen what the outcome, like in terms of real legal, or real grant funding will look like, we know that in that bill, this bill is attempting to support retail, existing grocery stores, existing food retail institutions, but also ones that want to come up, so that communities can actually take, do for self and actually lead in this effort. Because frankly, we've seen a lot of different big box stores come in and leave the neighborhood after utilizing a lot of the tax incentives and a lot of support, but they just don't stick around. So it is really important that we start seeing more community, that we start supporting more community rooted efforts in this respect. And this is where the partnership, the power sharing that Ruby's talking about, both from entities like the food bank, but also from the city. Mario, you were talking about the city, right? The city made an announcement a few months ago about having city-run grocery stores, and that's phenomenal. We love that.
Yes.
But how about we also see that the city supporting efforts that are already in place, and not just sort of reinventing the wheel, right? Like, so we absolutely want to see those city-run grocery stores, but we also want to see the city supporting, whether it's Austin or Inglewood or whichever neighborhoods that are like the 40 acres market or whatever efforts are currently out there, also elevating them, also supporting them, because frankly, it's a difficult problem we're trying to solve. It's a problem that is created by decades of disinvestment. It is a problem that is created at the intersection of redlining and restricted covenants, and it's a problem at the intersections of closed schools and closed train stations. And Inglewood is an economically disconnected region. It is characterized by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning as an economically disconnected region, which means that Inglewood residents are not able to participate in the regional economy of Chicago, as great as it might be. And the very fact that we have closed train stations means that we have 1/4 of the access to jobs as a resident on the north side does. So an Inglewood resident will take, maybe 50 minutes to get somewhere that a north side resident will take 20 minutes to get to,
right.
or that can access 250 or 280,000 jobs when a north side resident can access 1 million jobs with the same travel distance. So there are so many of these other issues that are affecting this problem. The problem of density, when we don't have enough, even for the market, the fact that we have a closed school, the fresh market, the fact that we have a closed school and a closed train station. Imagine that if that school was open still and functioning and still alive, and if the train station was still open and alive, it would be a different kind of retail endeavor. It would be a different kind of business, right?
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the impact that Greater Chicago Food Depository has had on food disparities in Chicago.
Yeah. Impact is, I always like talking about lead and lag measures, right? So our lead measures, those are the measures that we're trying to work towards. How many people are we trying to feed? How many households? With that lag measure looking towards, are we ending food insecurity? Are we truly ending hunger? Are we building economic wealth? And so we are able to serve so many of those households to get to that lag measure, which is our end goal. And I love Sana, when we have this conversation, she always grounds us in ending that life expectancy gap. That's our ultimate lag measure. We should not be one of the wealthiest countries in the world with a life expectancy gap like that. And that's our ultimate lag measure. But the impact that we think about now is how many households are we able to serve through those 800 partners and networks there? How many meals can we get? I mentioned our meal service program, but thinking about for families or individuals who have difficulty preparing meals, whether because they have accessibility barriers or time constraints or whatever else, being able to have a fresh meal at a pantry is a shift to then allow you to free up some time, which is really valuable, to spend it elsewhere. And so that's some of the ways that we're thinking about impact, with working towards that really bold end goal that we have in our mission of ending hunger and addressing those rates of food insecurity. But acknowledging that again, and I know I keep saying this and not trying to be redundant, but that is not done alone. That is not the Food Depository's work. That's our work in partnership with all of our incredible partners across the county. Sana, I don't know if you can take it to a micro level in a way of kind of talking about IMAN's pantry and kind of what the impact looks like there, because I think that really paints the picture of the impact that the Food Depository can have when distributing food across the city and county.
Sure. I mean, it's actually just really a very interesting ecosystem that we are finding onto 63rd and Racine intersection between the Food and Wellness Center, which is the pantry that we launched in partnership with the Greater Chicago Food Depository, and the Go Green Community Fresh Market right across the street from that pantry. So there is a synergy that is found there, which I believe is something that we want to explore further and invest in more, because again, we talked about the problem of food insecurity as an income problem. Like that has to be stated time and time again. And also at the level of the level of the participant, right? It's an income problem, and at the systemic level, it's a problem of, like we talked about, disinvestment, about the business decisions that people make or don't make, and so between obviously all the incredible work, the food distribution work that has grown significantly since we launched the pantry back in 2020 to now, obviously we have a lot more people that we are seeing, a lot more families that we are serving, a lot more food that we're distributing, a lot more meals that we're giving out. But also on the fresh market side, we noticed that we have almost 37% of our transactions at the fresh market are EBT transactions, which is really something, to say that we're really serving a population in our community that is in some ways food insecure. We have 20 local vendors, so we're also trying to bring support basically food businesses in the community. And that was just as many local vendors at Whole Foods, which was 65,000 square feet in Inglewood. Mm-hmm. That's how many local vendors Whole Foods had. And we are 3,500 square feet, and we also have 20 local vendors. So we're pretty high on that front. We are trying to create many full-time jobs, right? So we have more full-time jobs than are typical in the grocery industry. Typically, you also see a lot of part-time employment. But one of our goals with the market was also to create, affect the local economy through jobs. And so we're seeing 14 full-time jobs, but also one of the things we started was an Inglewood resident discount. So just like trying to see how Inglewood residents, just wanting to also see, how can Inglewood residents, it is a neighborhood grocery store, and we wanted Inglewood residents to feel like this is their grocery store. And so we had a 5% off anytime. You just have to, you just say you're an Inglewood resident and you get 5% off. So through that, we're able to see that I believe more than between 30 to 35% of all our transactions are using the Inglewood resident discount, which means that 30 to 35% of all our transactions is by Inglewood residents, right? So that has been really good to be able to not only see where we're at with that commitment, but also to track that over time. And I think between these two spaces, I think it's been important to note just how having these brick and mortar assets in the community, what impact that has had. So for instance, from safety or feelings of safety to also community infrastructure in terms of like how people feel about the intersection. And then also the beautification, like just, we are probably the only, we are actually, at least from the WBEZ, we had a reporter come down and say, hey, you guys are the only business operation in Inglewood that actually has patio seating. Wow. And that is something to, that is not, there's racial disparities in that too. Like most predominantly white neighborhoods have businesses with patio seating. And that number is different when you go to a Hispanic neighborhood or you come to a predominantly Black neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm saying that the impacts are greater than just like the root causes of this is, you will see them, they're not just, the root causes are beyond food. The impacts are also beyond food, right? Yeah. The impacts are not just limited to the satisfaction or the health benefits of eating a good meal, even though those in and of themselves are tremendous. In Inglewood, the Quality of Life Initiative identified nutrition as a high priority because we do have high rates of chronic disease. We do have high rates of diabetes and heart conditions and obesity, and all of that is food related. So obviously it is a very, very high priority, and it is, but when we start to do that right, and when the effects of that transcend, they transcend just a satisfied, body. It's about, then it becomes more also about, hey, how does it affect your quality of life? Exactly. And your feelings of safety and happiness and joy.
I am curious, Sana, to ask you about what's happening in Atlanta and how IMAN is helping folks down there. Even though we are hyper local, with the mutual aid report. The idea, though, is people need help, and people need help everywhere. We are not on an island in Chicago. People need help all over the place. What is IMAN doing in Atlanta to help those folks on the West End?
That's a lot of good stuff is cooking, Mario. We were just all day, we just been talking all day about the future IMAN Atlanta, and also sort of taking stock of, just what we've accomplished here over the last 8 years. Obviously, we are replicating our holistic model from Chicago to Atlanta in a way that obviously is unique to Atlanta, but at the same time still takes into consideration that the intersectional ways and the holistic interventions that we bring to any issue. So part of what we're doing here, we're doing incredible organizing work around criminal justice reform, around voter disenfranchisement. We're doing a lot of incredible work around housing for returning citizens. So we have what we call the Green Reentry Village right here that I was able to go and visit earlier today. And also doing, just our infusing the arts in everything that we do, as we always do. And beginning to think about, okay, how do we really bring quality healthcare to people in the community? Because it's the unique thing about the healthcare work that IMAN does, even in Chicago, is not just that we're bringing high quality primary behavioral and oral healthcare, but also the cultural competency that we provide for our patients. Because a lot of people will just drive a longer distance to come to an IMAN clinic just because they feel like they're more understood and they're treated with great respect and they feel warmth, and we are multilingual in our health center. We have a staff that speaks Spanish, English, and Arabic. So the short answer to your question is that we are in a very sort of strategic moment here in Atlanta, thinking big, thinking long, but also celebrating some of the accomplishments of the last many years. And obviously, we also have a farmers market here, a Fresh Beats and Eats farmers market. So food is very much part of what we're doing here in a very typical sort of Georgia style, because we have a lot more urban farmers involved in how we're doing food here, and a lot of possibilities.
I know that I'm getting closer to the end of our program, and before I close out and make sure that you get on your plane so you can come back home where people need you, Sana, I want to talk directly about the Greater Chicago Food Depository. If you are listening to this program and you're in need of help and you're looking for food, we'll just start with food. When you go on their website, chicagosfoodbank.org, on the banner, there's a box. It says Find Food. There's another box for the other people I want to talk to. If you are listening to this program and you have a way to donate to the Greater Chicago Food Depository, there's a space for you there as well. And it's right next to Find Food. It says Donate. If you are one of the bilingual listeners to this program, there's an ES box right next to the menu, and the 3 lines, that's called a hamburger, believe it or not. Right next to the hamburger is a box that says ES. That translates everything on this website into Spanish for you. If you need it, there's a way to get it. And the idea of this program and the guests we've had on it to date is that we don't want to see our friends and neighbors and our loved ones and our fellow citizens, our fellow Chicagoans, hungry or needing vital things to survive in an already treacherous and difficult situation here on planet Earth. I encourage you, if you are listening to this program and you're able to donate to not just the Greater Chicago Food Depository, but Grow Greater Englewood or any of the other folks we've had on our program, please consider doing that. The need is great. It's a bigger need, though, that if people get involved, then we are not having these discussions about food disparities in Chicago, Illinois anymore. We're just not. That's how it works. If you get involved and we start dealing with the root causes of these things in our city that are troubling and causing these disparities, including but not limited to the ability to be able to get to work on public transportation. That alone is a show by itself on a different format, probably my regular show, where we would talk about that. But the Greater Chicago Food Depository is doing the work. The website is chicagosfoodbank.org. Again, it's available in Spanish. It'll translate for you. We'll have to get someone Spanish-speaking from the Greater Chicago Food Depository to come and holler at my buddy Stephanie Manriquez. She speaks fluent Spanish, believe it or not. I know you couldn't tell by the last name, Manriquez. We want you to go to, let me back up. We encourage you, if you need the assistance, find it. You are not out here by yourself, and you're not going to be by yourself. There's a whole bunch of folks that the GCFD works with, not just IMAN, but other pantries and organizations around the city. To that end, before I cut everyone loose, Ruby, can you talk briefly about the other pantries and other organizations that you guys work with around the city?
Yeah, and I'm so thankful for the shout out about Find Food. I also want to say that if you give us a call, we have a neighbor services team that is also bilingual and can help you navigate finding your local food pantry or other food resources, and also help you enroll in SNAP and WIC. We know that those nutrition assistance programs are essential to supporting folks. And then I also want to flag it is supporting, donating, but also pulling up to stores like Iman's store. It's like pulling up to 40 acres and getting a delivery. It's supporting your local grocers. It's supporting your local businesses as well. And then time is money, like we mentioned. So you're welcome to volunteer. But some context, a donation of $1 equals 3 meals. And in fiscal year 23, so kind of last year, we were able, with these donations, with the support of folks, we were able to distribute $92 million of food across Cook County. And more than half of that went to our priority community areas, which we really look at rates of food insecurity, invest there. And then that funding also goes to invest in our partners. So since the pandemic, we've invested $18.5 million in our partners, which really is a commitment to how can we invest in those pillars there. And so when we talk about some of our other pantry partners, what you will see is that our partners are not just pantry partners. We mentioned our partners that are growers. We mentioned our partners that do workforce development and provide referrals. We have partners that help folks enroll in SNAP. We have healthcare partners. We have all these other partners. And we have 800 plus there. They are spread all across the county. And that Find Food app is going to help you find some of those partners and get connected to who's closest to you. They look like the IMANs of the world, right, that are doing so many incredible things and thinking about the entire ecosystem that needs to wrap around a community to improve it. And they're also doing incredible things in a smaller scale. So it might be your local church that is committed to serving their community and does that every Sunday. And that's what they have capacity to do. And I think that is what's beautiful about what I get to do every day, is work with a variety of partners that are all committed to making sure we can feed Chicago and feed Cook County and really work to this goal, towards this goal of ending hunger.
Sana Syed from IMAN and Ruby Ferguson from the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Thank you so much for being on the program. It's not enough to just say that we need to be looking out for each other anyway, because we do. That's what we should be doing. But to know that, especially for these many, many years, organizations like IMAN have really had their feet entrenched on these Chicago streets to make sure that folks are okay. It's much bigger than just food, unfortunately. And I've always been a big fan. I remember when it all started with IMAN, and knowing that the work that IMAN is doing and the work that the Greater Chicago Food Depository are doing is helping folks. So again, to our listeners, if you are checking the show out today, first of all, tell folks about the mutual aid report, but also make it your business to unlock these seemingly closed doors of information here in our city, and don't just limit it to Thanksgiving and Christmas and other holidays and holy days that are happening. chicagosfoodbank.org for the Greater Chicago Food Depository. I really appreciate you guys being on the show today. Thank you so much. Peace and respect. And I'm looking forward to sticking my nose in the Greater Chicago Food Depository's business in the future and hanging out and checking out what's going on with IMAN, because I know you all do summer very nicely. So I will be around.
Thank you, Mario. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you. And thank you, Ruby.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. This is WLPNLP Chicago, 105.5 FM Olympic Radio, and this is the Mutual Aid Report.